Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 938. Saturday, October the 26th. Sorry. October, didn't frighten anybody. October 26, 2019. Okay, well, let's go ahead and start. We have a lot to talk about today. Probably won't get it all in, but I'll do the best I can. So let's talk about first this article that appeared in the Gateway Pundit. And this is basically telling us that the Obama-appointed judge and Obama-appointed judge, I believe it's Beryl Howell, if I'm getting that name correct. The Obama-appointed judge has granted access to secret grand jury information in the Mueller report. And the reason being, according to the judge, because the Speaker of the House has announced an official impeachment inquiry. So, as we all know, this is almost never ever done. They almost never, in fact, I cannot think of a time, I'm not in the legal profession, but I'm not aware of any time where they've released grand jury information, especially for something like this. I would be very, very surprised. I know there's been some pushback in the initial hearing by the DOJ, and obviously the judge didn't care much for the argument that was made. But I would be very surprised if there's not a more vigorous effort on behalf of the DOJ to fight this judge's ruling, because this will set a precedent that I don't think we want to set. But remember, this can be used the other way. Now, I'm not concerned about it. Remember, the Penguin, Jerry Nadler, was screaming and hollering about getting this information. He was shot down. And this excuse that the reason that they're going to go ahead and do it and release this grand jury information from the Mueller investigation is because the Speaker has announced an official impeachment hearing. It's not an official impeachment hearing, it's an inquiry, and it's not really all that official because it's being done by just a select few individuals, Democrats, within the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's not been a vote in the entire House. It is completely, it's ridiculous. But that just shows you, it shows you more than just how biased and crooked these left-wing judges are, this particular Obama appointee, but it shows you that there's a lot of fear because the war has just been escalated up about 10 notches since the bar has made it clear that Durham is now conducting a criminal investigation. And so this is an effort by one branch of the far left-wing resistance, the courts, to do their best in the fight to try to engage in the battle and do what they can. Now, again, I'm not worried about what may come out of these secret grand jury testimony. If there was anything in the secret grand jury testimony that could have been, something that could have been used for impeachment, Weissman, old wise ass, would have found it. And, of course, he didn't. That's why Mueller couldn't find, or Weissman, we should say, could not find any evidence to prove that Trump was colluding with Russia. He couldn't even find enough evidence to make a strong case for obstruction. He had to kick it all over to the Attorney General. So what they will get out of this, however, is a bunch of information which they, again, can do what they normally do, feed it to the media, because remember, this is a media-driven campaign. It relies 100% on the deep state and their allies on the left. It requires that they feed selectively diced out information from hearings, and obviously this information as well. They're going to give that to the media and let the media run with it 24/7, hoping to drive opinion polls to give enough favor to strike some fear into the hearts of some never-Trump Republicans and some weak-kneed Republicans in the Senate so that they can get their impeachment. So this is a media strategy because there is no crime, and they certainly do not have the votes or anything that they could use to legitimately get a real impeachment hearing, let alone a real impeachment trial in the Senate and a real conviction. So they have to do a media campaign. And that's what all this is about. And this judge I do hope that the DOJ pushes back on this and fights this just because it's a bad precedent to set. But if they're going to set this precedent, then let's keep in mind that goes both ways. That goes both ways. Because there's going to be a lot of grand juries impaneled in the months to come by Mr. Durham. And we just may want to find out what some of those witnesses had to say. So, if this is going to set the precedent that they're going to allow the Mueller investigation, secret grand jury information to be released or given to the Democrats to be used, then that means that Republicans in control of some of these committees in the Congress can then go to a judge and use this as the prerequisite, as the standard bearer for why we can now get grand jury information. And so I do think that this ultimately is bad in general for justice and for the rule of law. I expect that the DOJ will put up a much more vigorous fight than the slimy attempt that they made in the initial hearings. We'll continue to watch this and see where it goes, but it's not good, but I have nothing to fear here, nor does the president, because again, if there was anything in the Mueller grand jury testimony, it would have been used to take down Trump in the first place. It wasn't there, or this would have been used. So the only thing it could possibly be used for is, again, for the bug-eyed fool to selectively leak information from this information that he's going to get to the media so that they can continue their role in the coup effort. So yesterday afternoon, Trump gave a little press briefing, as he normally does, and he said, quote, "You will see things no one will believe," quote, end quote. And he's talking about what we're going to learn from, I guess, a combination of the Huckleberry Horowitz report and the investigation by Durham and Barr. You will see things no one will believe. Trump knows what's coming. I know what's coming. I'm pretty sure most of you know what's coming. It's taken a lot of patience. Think about it. I've done 938 TowerGate videos. 938 TowerGate videos. And it took us until TowerGate video number 937. And you have to remember there's been quite a few days where I've probably missed videos. So we can probably, in terms of days, we can talk about somewhere around 950 days. So somewhere in the ballpark of almost 1,000 days of misery that we have had to put up with, going through the Mueller investigation, witch hunt, the obstruction, all the other things that we've had to go through, not to mention what the president and everyone around him has gone through, to get to that point where we got to yesterday, where we finally had Barr come out and say, yes, we now have a criminal investigation. This is a major turning point. This is a major turning point. So after nearly 1,000 days of this brutal onslaught, we can now see that the worm is turned, and that now this thing is going to head in the other direction very quickly. And I suspect the next 1,000 days, when we get to the end of that, things are going to look a lot different on the other side. Trump also did an interview with Doug Weed, who's, a presidential historian, writes books on every president. He sits down and does these fairly lengthy interviews with them. And we know that there's something that's going to come out in Doug Weed's book, which will be released here in the not too distant future, in which case he tells Doug Weed that Obama did spy on his campaign and that they got caught. Obama spied on his campaign and they got caught. That's going to be in Doug Weed's book, who's a presidential historian. It's very important for history's sake. It'll tell us that months before we heard from Barr telling us that he now had a criminal investigation, Trump was telling Doug Weed that he already knew that Obama spied on him and that they were caught. Trump knew they were caught months ago. He's known what's coming. That's why he's been keeping his cool as best he can. while continuing to fight back. He definitely knows what's coming. And so does the deep state and their allies and the media and in the Demo-Commie Party. That's why they're behaving the way they are. Like desperate, wounded animals backed into a corner. They know what's coming, and it's not pretty. Well, yesterday we had the Rotten Reverend Clinton delivering a sermon at the funeral of Elijah Cummings, where she actually compared Cummings to the Elijah in the Bible, and she even said, quote, like that Old Testament prophet, he stood against corrupt leadership of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Clearly, she was making a reference to Trump and Melania, suggesting that Trump is like King Ahab and Melania like Queen Jezebel and Elijah like this great prophet Elijah, when in fact it's Elijah Cummings who is one of the most corrupt son of a bitches to ever darken the halls of Congress. And in all his years supposedly serving his district in Congress, his district has been forever a cesspool of drugs, violence, murder, rape, you name it. It's a shithole. He's done nothing for that community, including black people in that community. Nothing. All the while enriching himself. And the fact is, his wife is now wanting to take his seat. And you know what? She's more corrupt than he is. I've never talked about it on TowerGate, but there's been quite a few stories about his wife. She's involved in a lot of corruption, pay-for-play stuff herself. These are horribly corrupt people. And the Rotten Reverend Clinton's sermon, while she got a big round of applause for doing that, ultimately, the Rotten Reverend Clinton has got hell to pay. Because it's just a matter of time before Barr and Durham find out who the hub of the wheel was behind all this corruption and who's pushing a lot of this. All roads lead to the Rotten Reverend Clinton, and I think they'll get there. She's despicable. James Clapper, the unwitting idiot, was on CNN. I'm sure many of you have seen this clip. My friends, I've seen some pasty-looking people before who look like they're a bit nervous. But man, Clapper looked really, really nervous on CNN. Sounded really nervous. And pretty much made it clear to Jake Crapper that he's pretty worried. So he admits, Clapper admits to CNN that he's under investigation. He is going to be interviewed. And he's either stupid or he's lying when he says that he doesn't know what he did that might rise to the level of criminal infraction. Well, I think he's lying. He knows exactly what he did. He's involved in the whole damn turkey shoot. The whole thing. Up to his eyeballs in it. He's a bad liar. And of course we know this. All this guy does is lie. Everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. So whatever he says, just flip it to the opposite and you'll get the truth. So in this particular case, if we apply that principle, that means he knows exactly why he's being targeted by Barr and Durham in this criminal investigation. He knows exactly what those criminal infractions were. In fact, we're going to be dealing with the story here in just a second about Sidney Powell and the incredible motion that she filed and what she has learned from her investigation while representing Michael Flynn. And it appears that she has uncovered evidence which she lays out in her brief and her motion to the court, that she has pretty strong evidence that it was Clapper who was deeply involved, along with James Baker, in leaking the Flynn-Kislyak phone call. For all this time, we've been trying to get to the bottom of who was the leaker of the Flynn-Kislyak phone call. Now it appears it was James Baker, General Counsel James Baker, Comey's FBI lawyer, and Clapper, who were the two major players in facilitating that Flynn-Kislyak call. And I assume because Clapper was a DNI that he probably had the call and he probably provided it to Baker, who then provided it to Ignatius, David Ignatius. That's what Sidney Powell has discovered, along with a bunch of other things. We can't even get to all the things she discovered that she lays out in her brief, but we're going to go through a few of them. So there's a lot of things that Clapper, he was involved in everything. I mean, he's the DNI. All the spy stuff that was going on could not have gone on without his knowledge. Could not. Misfit, Halper, Downer, the setting up of Flynn, of Papagalopoulos, of Stone, of Caputo, all these things he had to know about. Or else Brennan was deceiving him as well. And I don't think so. I think Brennan and Clapper were working very closely together. So, as I just mentioned, Sidney Powell has made this court filing, and I haven't read through the whole thing. I've read through some of it over on Conservative Treehouse. Haven't had a chance to read through it all. Haven't had time, but I will over the weekend. And, of course, she lays out how the government, based on her research and the information she's acquired, how the government attempted to frame Flynn and why the case should be dismissed. And the judge now has her briefing. In addition to the motions, the two motions she has filed for the Brady material. But just what she knows so far and what she laid out in her briefing, she laid out the following things. That Clapper was a key player in leaking the Flynn-Kislyak phone call, and that it was James Baker, FBI General Counsel James Baker, who gave the phone call, which he obviously got from Clapper, to David Ignatius, the fake news reporter. Baker, James Baker, was the one who leaked the Flynn-Kislyak phone call to David Ignatius. And he was given that information by Clapper. That's a felony. That is a felony. Both Clapper and Baker committed felonies. That's just one. A piece. There's much more. She also has learned, Sidney Powell has also learned, that Lisa Page edited the Flynn 302 to make it look like he was lying. Not only did she just take and move a couple of sentences and put a Flynn response where it actually was not, they actually made up an entire question and answer. They made up a question that was never asked, and then they put in an answer that Michael Flynn never gave. They literally created out of whole cloth a question and an answer. And that question and that answer is what they used to propagate their next series of steps to begin putting pressure on the White House to fire Flynn, and would eventually lead to a great deal of the evidence that they would use to frame him and try to use him to get to Trump. And of course, as I just mentioned to you, Sidney Powell also puts in a briefing about Clapper being the one who gave the information to David Ignatius, the fake news reporter. And also, she has some sort of a direct quote from Clapper, where Clapper is telling David Ignatius, personally, Clapper is telling Ignatius himself to take the kill shot on Flynn. So Clapper gives the Kislyak Flynn phone call to Baker, who gives it to Ignatius. Then Clapper follows up by contacting Ignatius himself and said, hey, take the kill shot on Flynn. Maybe that's why Clapper's nervous. If Sidney Powell's got it, Barr and Durham have it. Those are not good words to use when you're the DNI. Take the kill shot on Flynn? Not a very good word selection, if you ask me. From a guy who works for an agency that conducts a lot of assassinations. We also learned that Lisa Page lied about editing the Flynn 302. She was caught editing the Flynn 302, then asked about it. She lied. But now we know she did it. Sidney Powell's also got some very good information on both Mifsud and Halper, which I haven't gotten to that section yet, but I'm looking forward to it. She knows an awful lot about Halper. She's done some deep dives into Halper, and she's discovered that his boss is involved with a lot of these high-level FBI coup plotters. A direct tie from Halper to the coup plotters. And I'm sure there's more. And I'm sure that Durham and Barr are going to be all up into Halper's business, if you know what I mean. Key player. She also points out that McCabe and Comey are the ones who cleared Silly Sally Yates to use the altered 302s to pressure the White House counsel to fire Flynn. And that goes along with the next thing, which is that McCabe also altered Peters Ben Strokenus's 302 notes on Flynn. So Peters Ben Strokenus, along with this other FBI agent, interview Flynn. They basically say, well, we don't think he's lying. They then turn over their notes. We're not talking about the actual 302s. They were doctored later. But initially, right after doing it, they turned over some handwritten notes, which they provided to McCabe. Then McCabe altered the notes given to him by Peters Ben Strokenus and this other FBI agent. He then gave that to Silly Sally Yates, and that's what she used to put pressure on the White House counsel to fire Flynn. She said, hey, look what we got. And they fired Flynn. All lies. Doctored 302s. Doctored review notes. Very, very much a felony, by the way, on everyone's part who took part in that. We are now hearing, it's being reported, that Andy McCabe is requesting immunity in exchange for his testimony. McCabe is requesting immunity in exchange for his testimony. I would not offer him immunity in exchange for his testimony. They don't need it. They got all the evidence. A year ago, that would have been good. But if you're Durham and McCabe comes to you now, or his lawyers come to you and say, hey, my client would like to cut a deal. He'd like to talk in exchange for immunity. I'd be like, well, a year and a half ago, that would have been great. But now, we already got everything, including your client. No, I wouldn't cut a deal with him at all. He's not a big enough fish. You need a bigger fish to cut that kind of deal. And he ain't it. He's just another perp on his way to prison. Of course, we know that the demo commies freaked out after they heard the news that Durham was now involved in a criminal investigation, going to be impaneling grand juries, issuing subpoenas, documents, and will even file criminal charges. They're freaking out. And of course, they're doing exactly what you think they would do. They are now attacking Barr and saying he's now, working for the president as part of the president's re-election campaign. But see, this is all bullshit. And ultimately, the Democrats are going to throw a lot of bullshit out there with their friends in the media. But keep in mind, my friends, don't let it agitate you too much. Because as I said earlier, when you get into this type of a situation, you can throw all the bullshit you want against the wall. But Barr and Durham are not dealing in bullshit. They're dealing in facts and evidence. Now, grand juries, subpoenaing documents, witnesses, and indicting people. And you can't do that with bullshit. You need facts and evidence. And I'm pretty sure Barr and Durham have got all that they can handle. Jack Posobiec is now also reporting that James Baker, who we just talked about, as being the one who actually gave the information about the Flynn-Kislyak phone call to David Ignatius, former General Counsel James Baker has now flipped. Now, he was Comey's lawyer. He knows everything Comey knows. He also was the one who was getting first-hand information delivered to him by the Rotten Reverend Clinton's lawyer, Mr. Sussman. He is a direct tie to the Rotten Reverend Clinton. James Baker has flipped and is now cooperating with the General Counsel, Mr. Durham. That's according to Jack Posobiec. James Baker has flipped. McCabe's trying to flip, and Baker has flipped. That's what we're learning in the most, on the latest reports. So, as you know, I just briefly reported to you last night at the very end of the video that the investigation had gone from a review into an actual criminal investigation. That's because it literally broke at about 9 o'clock, just a few minutes before I did the video. Just a few minutes before I did the video is when I learned about that. So I was only able just to mention it in the video last night, was not really able to talk about it very much. So let me go ahead and do that now with the time we have left. So it's on. It's totally on now. And if you thought the deep state, the left-wing media, and the demo commies were panicked before and desperate before and willing to take any and all measures before, now things are going to get really hairy. So buckle yourselves in, folks, as I've been saying for a very long time. Buckle yourselves in. Turbulence dead ahead. Big turbulence. So what can we expect to happen now over the next few weeks and months? Now that the deep state, the demo commies, and their friends in the left-wing media, their allies in the left-wing media, know that they're in deep trouble. Well, the first thing that you can expect is for the attacks to intensify greatly. And they will intensify now with the focus being not, they'll still be on Trump, but there's going to be a real sharp focus right now on Attorney General Barr. He knew this. He knew the day that he came out and made this announcement exactly that the guns were going to be turned on him. And as he said in the hearings, he really doesn't care. He knew when he took this job what he was going to do. He knew what kind of shitstorm it was going to stir up. He knew he was going to be targeted for doing so. But he did it anyway. And now he's apparently backing up his statements that he made when he was being questioned. When he was asked if he was going to look into all these things, and he said he would. When he said that there was spying on the Trump campaign, and he just wanted to find out if it was properly predicated. So now we're at this point. So he knew. He knew when he made the statement. He knew when he came out and admitted, yes, it's now a criminal investigation, that he was going to be targeted big time. He is going to face unbelievable attacks. There will be various calls for him to step aside, to resign, to recuse, and all these other things, because they'll say, well, you're acting as Trump's attack dog. You're on a political witch hunt. You're trying to poison the water for the 2020 election right along with the president. You're trying to help him get reelected. This is all the type of crap that's going to be thrown at Barr. He doesn't care because he understands what I just told you, is that that's nothing but a bunch of bullshit. He's not dealing in bullshit. He's dealing in evidence, facts, grand juries, documents, and indictments. And he knows that that's where the rubber meets the road. And all this other stuff, they can throw it out there all that they want, but he knows at the end of the day, he is going to be vindicated along with the president and all of those of us who've been talking about this now for so long. Nearly 1,000 days I've been talking about this. I knew we would eventually get here. I didn't think it would take this long, but now that we're here, we're in for a hell of a rough ride for quite a few months now, coming up probably all the way through the 2020 elections. I would think things are about to get turned up quite a few notches because we're dealing with desperate people who know that they're in a world of shit. There's nothing that they won't do now. So we can expect that the deep state will pull out all the stops. Here's something else that you can expect to happen. We know from listening to the rotten Reverend Clinton, we know from listening to other Democrats what their strategy is. It's to be able to get the impeachment hearings moved over to the Senate, where, I just learned this, by the way, recently. As I was telling you the other day, they only need to get about 20 Republicans to turn, and that's probably not that hard to do if you can get enough propaganda out there. But now we're learning that they may have even a more devious plot, and that's because of a Senate rule. A Senate rule that says in the impeachment hearings, you don't need necessarily 2/3 of the Congress or the Senate. You don't need 2/3 of the Senate. What you need is 2/3 of the senators who are present. 2/3 of the senators who are present. So that means that they wouldn't really have to get 20 Republicans to vote for impeachment. They would just have to find 20 Republicans willing not to show up for the vote. 20 Republicans not to show up for the vote. Because they only need a majority of 2/3 of the senators present. So this might be part of their diabolical plot being run by lawfare, because it certainly isn't being run by the bug-eyed fool, the penguin, and Madam Botox. They're too stupid. But the lawfare folks have been running this impeachment scam since day one. This is probably what they're angling for. But they need something good enough to keep 20 Republicans from showing up to vote, so that they can get that 2/3 of the senators who are present. So this is a bit of a game changer. Will they go to these lengths? Because that is a very, very politically risky move for both Democrats and Republicans. This would be like the Hail Mary of Hail Marys. Very, very risky move. Would they do it? My friends, they are desperate. And remember, we're not just talking about Democrats who are being threatened here. It's Republicans too. Quite a few of them senators. Most of them sitting on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Republican and Democrat. But here's something else that you can expect. And when this happens, this is when all the other things that they're trying, which we just talked about, get blown completely out of the water. And that is when one of the deep staters involved in the plot decides to save his neck by becoming the John Dean of Spygate, by requesting immunity to testify to everything they know and taking down all the criminal conspirators. Barr and Durham are not going to offer this deal to someone as low level as McCabe. He doesn't have enough information, and he would have to be willing to dump everybody and have the evidence, and I don't think he has it. He needs to go a little higher. He needs to go a little higher. And James Baker, general counsel, has probably quite a bit of information, but I don't know that he goes high enough. You're going to need someone like Brennan, or Comey, or Rice, or Yates. One of those four. And the big fish, Barack Hussein Obama. As soon as the first whistleblower, and I can assure you now, since, in fact, that's one of the reasons why they probably let it be known to the New York Times that they're now moved into a criminal investigation. It was probably done by Durham, a purposeful leak. Why? To scare the hell out of all these people who know they're involved. To get one of them, and it's already trapped two people, it appears, Baker and McCabe have already, that quickly, within 24 hours, have made it known they're willing to talk, cooperate. That was to bring to the surface as many as possible high-level people willing to spill their guts and tell everything they know to give up the entire plot. When that happens, the entire media narrative, the demo commies, the whole 9 yards, they're blown out of the water. They are blown out of the water. And that could go very, very quickly from there. That's what you want to watch for next. That is what to watch for next. Who decides to turn and become witness for the government? Keep watching. Thank you guys. Have a good night. See you. Bye.